Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. This is the fourth video about the base building system previewed by Todd Pappy at the last SysMCon, which they will soon begin development on. The first video I set out 6 main areas of concern. The second delved into the first 2, having to do with the form and what we had bought from base building, and the third with 2 items regarding attack and defense. And this will cover the last 2, which I will call economics and tools. This keeps every video digestible size, but it also means that as you go, I realize there were things that I should have explained better for lack of time, and also, things that Todd Pappy could have explained better for lack of time. So we start with 2 types of settling, which I'm going to call squatting and homesteading. Squatting is occupying a place that you have no authority to occupy. You find a place, plop down your construction equipment, and build, for example, a turret, a well, a refinery. Homesteading starts with a legal claim to the land and then build or have built for you a settlement on it. Squatting is extremely risky and extremely ephemeral because you don't have ownership of the land, you don't have ownership of the building to build on them, and therefore no legal right to defend them. If you squat on unclaimed but claimable land and then somebody else claims it, your buildings are either property of the new owner or most likely auto-bulldozed. Can't you fight them off? Well, for reasons I'll get to in a moment, probably not. If you build on claimed land while the owner is, for example, logged off and they return, your buildings can be either taken by the landowner or simply auto-bulldozed, again, with nothing you can do about it. There is also one even more frustrating way to instantly use your squatting buildings, which I will get to in a moment. But first, this slide, which many people took to mean that the full and middle security systems were to be exclusively homesteading, while the null security systems would be exclusively squatting. Now, I sincerely hope that this is an oversimplification and that there is the availability of homesteading on null security locations because of the extreme ephemerality of squatting. Also, I expect that there should be squatting possible on the middle and high security systems because we have NPC squatting there already in the form of the derelict outposts. There's also the matter of this first principle. Many folks have paid for the ability to do land claims, and that purchase should be respected to the greatest extent feasible. In other words, on all 3 levels of systems. Another thing with this slide is it gives the impression that the important thing about a land claim are taxes and protection. They are not the most important thing. They are not even remotely close to the most important thing. The most important thing is clear title, is the recording that you, and only you, have ownership rights on the tract. And this is where the gridded system of square tracts makes sense. The title records can be a simple table versus having to do a mathematical comparison of the extents of nearby tracts to see if there is any overlap. And the location of that data table is the global database. So that if you need or want to move from region to region or shard to shard, your base can move through the global entity graph to the entity graph of the destination shard. But without clear title, somebody could be squatting on the exact same spot in another shard. And if you were to try to move your squatting structures with you to that shard, there would be all sorts of unresolvable problems. So here is the kicker. Squatting settlements are shard locked. If you have to or want to log into a different shard, sorry, your squatting settlements never existed there. Or rather, they're still existing on the original shard, possibly itself being squatted and looted by others. That's why if you squat on claimable land and it gets claimed, you won't be able to stop the auto-bulldoze because it will likely have been claimed on some other shard, and you have no idea which. This is why I said that you can't pay to have the king and queen buildings, the hangars, automated warehouse, and hospital, built on squatting settlements, because they're just too ephemeral to have so much value in them. This also parallels real life. If you're signing a construction contract, a standard provision is that you affirm that you have clear title to the worksite. And if the contractor is on the ball, they will do a title search to confirm it. Otherwise, it can be bulldozed. This is why I said that if you defeat a homestead, you can't steal the land claim, because the land claim isn't simply possession of the geotag. It is the entry in the title records in the global database. Now, if you take over a squatted settlement and squat there yourself, sure you can do that, because nothing was stolen, because nothing was ever owned. As to why the automated warehouse could only be disabled and not destroyed or looted, 2 things. First, if you attack a homestead and lose, does the homesteader get to go to your storage at, say, Grimhex and take everything? No. So it seems like the stakes are entirely asymmetrical, and then nobody would store anything at a homestead, and then you still have nothing to loot. And the only thing lost is having the homestead base be as convenient as having your base elsewhere. So please, don't have things be as binary as this slide suggests, and have claims be available on no security planets and squatting available on the medium and full security planets. Now, since I've raised the topic of shards, let's look at a particular question. How does your homestead settlement, not squatting, look when you are on a different shard and or when you are logged off? There are three possibilities. First, invisible. The land appears to be claimed but undeveloped. If you log into that shard, it suddenly goes from undeveloped to developed with all your buildings of your base popping in, which might be jarring to someone standing there at the time. This is, however, simple and of minimal impact to all the shards that you are not at, which by definition are the majority of them. Number 2, inactive. The land is claimed and developed, but the buildings are locked down tight and inactive, perhaps able to be superficially damaged, but when the player returns to the shard, they are instantly repaired to the state that they were on whatever shard and time the player logged out and stored the base in the global entity graph. Number 3, active. The land and buildings exist, and the automated defenses will respond to anyone in your organization's attack list or who attacked the homestead. Buildings can be disabled, but the warehouse cannot be looted. And why would you set your homestead to be able to be attacked while you aren't there? Well, let's say you're in an org community, and your org mates in the neighboring tracks are relying on your defensive turrets as part of a shared community defense. Now, I'm willing to suggest to let the players decide which level to use for their base and even have conditional rules. So, for example, have your base be invisible on regions other than your primary region, inactive on shards in your region that you rarely, if ever, play on, and active on the shard you and your org set in the matchmaker to make your primary shard. Moving on to economics, a quick note about this building. Please, have it be used to extract materials other than the ones that are collected by hard rock mining. Players and developers have invested too much into hard rock mining game loop to see it rendered obsolete or irrelevant. I would suggest that this mostly extracts liquid commodities and some gases contained in rocks. I don't say all gases because I'm still holding out hope for some sort of gas extraction on gas giant planets. And then on the economic side, there are two words that Todd Pappy said in his presentation, or really sort of mumbled them, followed by a silence where the crowd wonder about what he just said.
And even ships.
Even ships. Now, some folks, let's call them the hypercrafters, hoped that what he was meaning to say was that even all ships, and they could someday build their own Javelin or 890 because in their hearts they want to be able to build everything, while others hoped, just as fervently, that he absolutely was not meaning that. Recently, there was quite a heated discussion on my Discord on exactly this subject. Arguing against the hypercrafters is two things. First, it's ridiculous that in a world where whole planets are used by companies like Crusader Industries to build ships, that just anybody can do it for themselves on a homestead. I mean, you can, with a Freedom of Information Act request, get access to the warehouse full of plans for the Saturn V rocket. They are public domain. Does this mean that you could build one? No, even NASA no longer possesses the requisite manufacturing capability. That's why they started over designing the Artemis SLS to go back to the moon. But being able to craft all ships is also ridiculously risky. The entire funding model of Star Citizen is based on selling ships and their supply and demand curve. And you want to screw around with that by making it possible to make ships? Never underestimate the ability of players, when real money equivalents are on the line, to mass organize or simply contract with gold farming technoserfs. Is there, however, a middle ground between all ships and no ships? One that fits the idea of self-sufficient homesteading? Yes, of course there is. For inspiration, Google kit cars and kit ultralight aircraft. Yeah, they kind of make Drake look like a luxury brand, but that's the idea. They are just a tubular frame, perhaps with a small pressure vessel, or maybe just relying on your spacesuit, with slots that you can put the major components of engines, shield generator, cooler, quantum drive, thrusters, life support, avionics, weapons, etc., that you can salvage from other craft or buy from Platinum Bay or wherever. It fits the milieu of self-sufficiently, doesn't risk the value equations of CIG's funding model, is fun and funky, doesn't cause any fretting over the unsurprising fact that it is uninsured and uninsurable, and best of all, there's no need to try and fail to block it behind some massive resource grind. Easy made, easy flown, easy crashed is the motto of the Home-Built Spaceship Society. That is how I think they should fulfill Todd Pappy's two-word promise. It does qualify. Now, let's segue to the subject dear to my heart, the design tools, as I was an early adopter and advocate of computer design software for architects and facility managers, even writing some. And better tools make better designs. And I was very heartened when Todd Pappy talked about having a separate surveyor tool to design the layout. Because never mind the movies, architects do not design buildings by walking around on the construction site. They create a plan, and others reference the plan when building. Real-world design is iterative. You create and discard many preliminary layouts, literally layer by layer, with increasing levels of refinement. Real-world design is collaborative, with lots of back and forth between the designer, owner, and users. Remember, many of these bases are going to be used by a whole org, and real-world design is done by talented people. This isn't a single-player game. This is a game played by groups of friends, likely in an organization, and possibly designing a whole cluster of adjacent land claim homesteads from individuals with codependent circulation and protection goals. And every group of players is going to have that guy, and I don't mean that gender specific, that maybe is an architect or engineer themselves, or who just loves to play city builder games, or maybe both. And a smart organization is going to want to have that guy to design all their adjacent homesteads with the goal of creating a coherent, safe, and efficient community. You either have a clue about how to approach that sort of thing or not. But that guy is going to need a whole different set of design tools than a single-player game would. So when you complete a land claim, you can create an external file of the terrain, resources, and existing improvements. You then transmit this file to that guy in your org. That guy can then bring it up and its adjacent files into the design tool and begin creating various preliminary layouts, each stamped not for construction. That guy can also note that the intended order of construction. They can then send those preliminary layouts back and forth with the landowner for feedback, and when everyone's happy, that guy can send a copy stamped final. Then the player can load the approved final layout into his buildership, and it will guide them as to where to place things. Yeah, very much like real life. And it needs to be, because the real-life process works. Since this is running long, I'll just say that for this video, the secret word is the motto of the Home-Built Spaceship Society. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.